Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the third in our series of three of our summer storm series. Today in our series, we will be discussing high winds and looking at derechos. I am joined today by Brandon Sullivan, who will be walking you through these case studies. We are recording this session, so if you would like to review the presentation, share it with fellow colleagues, we will be sending it out hopefully by the end of this week. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Brandon.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Brandon Sullivan. I am DTN's Director of Product Management for our Weather Intelligence software solutions. As Andrea said, we're going to wrap up our summer storm series today by looking at high winds, and we'll start by talking about a derecho that occurred this year. So what is a derecho? So it is a defined meteorological phenomena that's really essentially, widespread, long-lived complex of severe thunderstorms. These really can be as destructive as tornadoes, and in some cases, do have tornadoes kind of embedded in the leading edge of the complex of thunderstorms. However, generally, unlike tornadoes, the damage from derechos are, typically in one direction, kind of this straight line wind. They kind of follow a pretty straight path as they go across states. So, long-lived events. So to be classified as a derecho, wind damage must extend at least 400 miles, be at least 60 miles wide, and have wind gusts that are at least 58 miles an hour, which is the severe threshold from the National Weather Service. And they also include several well-separated significant wind gusts. So you can already see, we're talking about, being 400 miles in length. These are obviously very significant and widespread types of events. So I want to talk for a moment about a derecho that occurred actually this year on June 29th. Early in the morning, a complex of storms quickly organized in northeast Kansas and southeast Nebraska before eventually moving into northern Missouri and southern Iowa. By 7:40 a.m., so you can think just how early that is to start your day with some severe thunderstorms. Wind gusts of 80 mile an hour were already reported in Missouri. 2 hours later, by 9:40, the derecho was moving through southern Iowa into Illinois, where it was producing winds estimated up to 120 miles an hour. And then it reached peak intensity around 10:30 a.m. In far northeast Missouri, southeast Iowa, west central Illinois. And there was significant damage to poles, communication towers, roofs, homes, crops, a lot of agriculture damage as well. And there were roughly 500,000 customers that were without power from the storm, some of them for quite a while. And while this was obviously a very significant event, the costliest derecho on record actually occurred in August of 2020, kind of known as the Iowa derecho, which caused more than $12 billion in damage and left parts of Iowa without power for more than 2 weeks. And again, significant impacts, on agriculture and other things there as well. So just another quick overview to show how widespread some of these significant winds can be, from a derecho. So this is you can see the swath here of the 80 mile an hour wind gusts and just kind of how wide that was. There's also a brief tornado that was reported in far northeast Missouri. And then there was an actually, a county-wide corridor really of 100+ mile an hour gusts. Now, I actually dropped a little star here on the map in Western Illinois, where my family's from, my hometown. They were without power for several days, which, in today's in today's world is just kind of crazy to think about, but significant amounts of damage that definitely hit home for me. So just one, last image here to really show the size of these complex of thunderstorms. You can see here they kind of have that bowing structure indicative of, very strong inflow into the rear of the thunderstorm complex. And then ahead of that, very significant damaging wind gusts. You can see the complex gets started in Missouri and Iowa, Nebraska, and then eventually grows and expands off to the east. All the blue W's there are reports of wind damage. So you can see again just how widespread thunderstorm events like this can be. So let's talk about some of the impacts from derechos, but high winds in general, for electric utilities. Number one is, loss of power. So with extreme winds like this, especially in a derecho, damage to overhead lines can really cause, massive, long-lasting outages. And again, I think with derecho specifically, the the scale of the impact and the lines down can be, very overwhelming as they can cover, hundreds of miles across several states, as we saw. There's an increased fire risk, not only with derechos and thunderstorms in general, but any significant high wind event, as overhead power lines come down or any equipment failures can lead to, contact with trees, other objects that can spark fires. And then, there's substation impacts. So, if an energized substation is impacted, you got to transfer power to other stations, and you can have transmission lines that are damaged in these thunderstorm events, which can really wreak havoc on the ability to distribute power effectively. So I want to talk now about the tool that DTN has to provide situational awareness to, hazards in the future, like thunderstorms, like high winds, like derechos, etc. So the storm risk dashboard is a situational awareness tool that really aims to provide context around where the next threat will be, when it's going to be, what type of threat is it? Is it thunderstorms? Is it winter precip? Is it winds, flooding, etc.? And then how bad is that going to be? What's the severity of that event to your operation? So the storm risk dashboard has 7 days of hourly data on a completely global scale for onshore and offshore operations. And we also are able to understand threats on single points. So whether that's, the substation or lines or polygons. So looking at entire operating regions, service territories as a whole to provide that advance notice of severe weather on the horizon. So we do this by allowing our users to configure the thresholds that matter to them and the weather variables that impact their operation. So when we set up an asset in the storm risk dashboard, again, this could be a point, a line, a polygon. You're able to configure the thresholds that matter to that specific asset. So here, for example, I've set up a wind gust threshold, a wind speed threshold. This is an offshore asset that I was dealing with here, so I've set up significant wave heights and some other things. But we have a whole plethora of weather variables inside of the storm risk dashboard that again include wind, icing, heavy wet snow, high and low temperatures, visibility, rainfall, and more. So anything that could be relevant to your operation, you have the ability to define as an alert. And again, those go out to 7 days. And the beauty here of being able to set your own thresholds is we can really remove all of that noise when you're in business as usual operations. So there's no need to continuously check a daily forecast to see, if the winds are going to be above 40 miles an hour. We filter out all of that content that's not relevant to you, and you don't have to worry about again during kind of business as usual. So right now, in terms of strong winds, there's not too much in the way of derechos to talk about right now, as those are generally confined to the summer months, May, June, July, etc. But we do have some of the remnants of Hurricane Lee that is prompting some high wind alerts here in the storm risk dashboard. So I've set up some assets up in the Northeast near Halifax, and I have some alerts that have been triggered for me by the storm risk dashboard. Now you can see that the dashboard here is kind of pointing out that I'm going to have some low visibility problems in the next few days. But then as I look out into Saturday and Sunday, I can kind of see this long window that we have here where my sustained winds are going to hit the threshold that I've defined. You can also see down at the bottom the Halifax offshore wind asset that I set up. Again, it looks slightly different than the alerts that we're seeing for the airport, and that's because the dashboard lets us customize the thresholds and the variables that matter for each asset that we want to monitor. But we can see later in the week, sustained or wind gusts exceeding 40 miles an hour for these assets. So the storm risk dashboard, again, is continuously checking this every hour, looking out to 7 days and trying to give us a heads up when and where we're going to have problems. So just another example here showing, the system's ability to, process a point asset like the airport that's inland, or look at a polygon. It's again a very flexible platform that really can align to your specific operations and how you plan, prepare, and mobilize your teams. So now that we've got the proactive alert from the storm risk dashboard, we can dive in a little deeper into the data. So the tool contains, graphics for all different types of weather variables. Of course, high winds, wind gusts is one of them. So that's what you see here displayed on the left, along with my assets. And then on the right, this is an hourly timeline view that actually lets me dive into the hour by hour detail of when is the ramp up of those winds, when is kind of the ramp down. And we can also see here that I've plotted kind of the upper and lower bounds of our forecast engine's data. So basically, what's kind of the worst case, and being able to understand, what's kind of the top 10% of guidance, and then what's kind of the bottom 10. So again, really kind of diving in now that we've kind of got the alert and taking it a step further to really understand when and where we're going to have these problems. Now, I mentioned that, the system is fully global. So we're monitoring locations anywhere in the world. So I had set up an example asset here in Ireland, just to give, some context that we can monitor these threats anywhere. And now that we're kind of in this, real time mode, we can also see everything from lightning alerts, and any government agency alerts that have been issued for this asset, and then also current conditions. And you can see here that I've put things over in metric units for our friends, across the pond. So again, a very flexible platform on a global scale. And just one last one here, to kind of highlight that, again, we can look at things both onshore and offshore, whether that's, weather variables like wind or even things like wave heights, etc. That's something that the dashboard is capable of alerting on. But we are expecting significant winds off the British Columbia coast as a large low pressure system develops. This is a very common threat for them out there as large low pressure systems happen out there quite a bit. Just again, one more slide to illustrate that this is global coverage, and we take a lot of pride in the scale at which we're creating forecasts, the resolution that we're able to do that, and really serve whether you're looking at a very small scale in a couple counties, or you're serving numerous states or have operations in multiple parts of the world. Really able to provide that global weather intelligence for any of the weather variables that we talked about on a global scale. So what does mitigation look like for for derechos and for high wind in general, for electric utilities? First and foremost, the tool that we just talked about, right? A situational awareness view, like the storm risk dashboard, which really gives you insights into how different weather variables and weather phenomena are going to impact your operations. But taking that a step further, of course, too, with our artificial intelligence and machine learning solutions that really can help you understand business relevant insights into how weather is going to impact you. The days of weather impacts just being kind of a foregone conclusion and not being able to understand how bad they will be, those are gone. And we can use our outage prediction tools to actually predict the expected magnitude of outages, so you can mobilize staff and equipment in pre-stage. Grid resiliency investments, efforts like undergrounding, stronger materials, or uh, just anything that can help the infrastructure cope with high winds. We've seen a lot of this. Obviously, those investments will continue. And then lastly, mutual assistance participation. When you look at something like a derecho that's going to cover multiple states and be very widespread, the size and scale of the impacts are likely to stretch resources thin. So, getting ahead of it, requesting mutual assistance, early, and understanding that several utilities are likely competing for the same resources. Is paramount when dealing with an event like a derecho. So with that, I want to thank you for coming to the last of our summer storm series here on high winds. And if you participated in the other stories, thank you for that as well. My contact information is here on the screen, and I really appreciate your time today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.